Welcome. Deborah Greene has emerged as a champion of grassroots movements in the most recent years. In 2016, she drove through 40 states to interview individuals about what they felt on the election. Her most recent venture, an app called LiveaMoment, parallels a lot of grassroots techniques in the digital sphere by connecting users through short videos. Take a listen.
This is a Religica production. Religica.
What are 2 or 3 values in your life that are really important to you?
I love that question. Just the thought of values. People don't ask that, They have like goals, mottos, but to actually lead your life from values is a cultural shift I'd love to see. However, in the work that we do, we talk about our values all the time because it's leading from a place of mission. And I think having a mission at this moment in history is more important than anything, right? That it's not about legacy thinking because our legacy is now. One of the things that I'm working on right now is something called the future of now. That it's not just about the power of now anymore, it's the future of now, that the actual legacy work that we have to do is about every moment in this period of time on the planet. So that's almost like a virtue or value. And another piece of value for me is dignity and respect. When I've been out traveling, one of the things that I've seen is also about safety. That people, when they feel safe, are kind and even generous. And even the bigot wants to be considered kind among his own people, which is a really wonderful connected dot. If you're looking for somebody that's different than you, just know that that man who is doing something that you abhor, actually within his own community, actually has a value on his own humanity and the humanity of the people around him, and love and respect for the people around him. And just try to remember that in your dealings so you can think, there's a similarity between he and I, therefore I can build a bridge. So another value for me is bridge building.
I love the idea you brought up of like peace and safety. I feel like people act in violent ways when they feel unsafe. And I don't know if that's something we always think a lot about.
And it's not just about safety as in I'm going to get physically hurt. It's safety in relationship. It's emotional safety. It's safety in my place within a society. It's safety in my ability to earn so I can take care of my family. I mean, these are all ways in which we can take a breath because I feel safe enough to breathe, right? And that's when people become kind and generous. And they do that naturally. If I feel like I'm good, it's interesting, no matter where you are on the planet, when somebody feels like, okay, everything's copacetic, they instinctively give. I would say 99.9%, And actually, in my opinion, I feel like government is set up to create safety for its people. It's the base of why you have government, to make sure that we're all cool and copacetic and we can have our life and we can know that we can live a happy, healthy, peaceful life, And then when we don't have that, that's when all of the discord happens.
When we talk about a peaceful society, what does that mean for you and in the work that you're doing?
It's interesting. One of the things that I work a lot on and with different organizations and with my own company is how do you rebrand the concept of peace? Because does peace mean safety? Are they synonymous? Or what does peace mean to different people? And there's a couple of buzzwords, I think, in our society, peace, love, religion, God, scary. And people tend to take a step away from them. So I think it's really interesting to ask the question, is peace about safety? Or what is peace to you? I think that they are very intertwined, peace and safety. Mm-hmm. I absolutely do. And I think it's really important to find a way to talk about peace that doesn't feel as though it's out of reach for you or that it's like your mama's generation, and that, I live in California, so, all of a sudden you say peace and you have Birkenstocks and, flowers in your hair, which is quite lovely too, but that's not what we're talking about. And when I started the project that I've been working on, which is LiveaMoment, a number of years ago, I would ask people, and we were traveling, interviewing people about their state of peace, and I would ask about it, and many people would be like, oh, I don't really think about peace per se. That's 4 or 5 years ago, and look at us today. Everybody thinks about peace. Peace is not so about the 60s. It's about right now. There is an urgency to, can we live a peaceful life, and can we coexist on the planet, and can we do so without harming each other? Like, does my peace mean that you don't get peace? And how do we come together? And the idea of creating more oneness isn't just a nice kumbaya thought. It is kind of, at this moment, a requirement. It's a prerequisite for being a human being on the planet at this moment, more so than ever.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about getting these moments of peace, like you described earlier, from around the world, and how that has shaped kind of how you've come to understand peace?
There are a number of different things that I work on, and LiveaMoment is specifically around the idea that we want to build a peace technology. It is a way in which you can go on an app and take a moment of peace. That it's not about meditation, though we use meditation as the vehicle. It's just pause. We talk about pause, stop, breathe, just take a moment and recenter yourself. And we're trying to get people to do it at the top of the hour, but you can do it anytime you want. And we have filmed moments of peace from around the world. So you're actually stepping into a place. So you're getting a sense of what peace feels like in different places on the planet. So it's not just a pretty sunset, you know where it is. And that right there builds empathy, because you're then thinking about other people potentially who might be witnessing that sunset. And after you pause, you put in 3 words of how you feel, and it will map out how many people feel the same way you do at the same moment in time. So it's very much a I breathe, you breathe. And then there is the work that we do with our State of Peace, which we also do with Pathways to Peace, which is a wonderful nonprofit, where we interview people around the world about their state of peace. So we traveled before the election and was on the road for about 5 months and interviewed people in 40 states right before the US presidential election. And it was a really good cross-section to get people to take a moment and think about how they feel in that moment. And really, we have wonderful separate videos and peace blogs is what we're calling them, of people talking about how they are in this moment and what emotions are coming up. And there's definitely a connective tissue. I walked away from it with, I kind of said, okay, how am I going to express this to people now that I've had this huge tapestry of human emotion? And I walked away with 3 main things. And the first one is, we are more alike than not. Even with all the things that we're seeing through the media, there is definitely more love than hate. And then if people are safe, they are kind and even generous. And those are the 3 things that I walked away with. And that felt good.
Well, the whole idea of taking that moment for peace, which seems to happen less and less, do you think when we're trying to not only create peace, but accelerate peace, do you think it will be impossible to get the external peace that we're seeking, like the no wars, the hatred, without first cultivating that inner peace?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I started working on this after 9/11. So not the same projects, but the concepts were rolling around my head. And after 9/11, I traveled up and down the West Coast and interviewed high school students. And one of the students said, this is too big for me. You guys can't figure it out. Why do you keep saying the next generation will? Sorry.
Right.
And in the moment, I said, okay, what about 3 feet of peace? The 3 feet that is directly around your body. Can you create 3 feet of peace? And what would that look like? And he just kind of lit up, this 12-year-old kid, and he was like, oh, that I can do. And I said, okay, so you do that, I do that, he does that, then collectively maybe we could have a different conversation. So I think you're absolutely right. It is, first you build your own world peace, which is the world that's directly around you in 3-foot segments, right? Which means I'm good to you sitting across the table, because if I'm not, I'm creating discourse within my 3 feet. So it's just bite-sized ways. Can we be better human beings for ourselves so we can be better human beings for each other? And that kind of became the base of everything I've done ever since. So you hit it like right on the head. You can't have a peaceful conversation about peace if you're all out of whack inside.
Have you, I guess, taking those videos, like noticed anything that's really made you?
Yes. I mean, there's so many things. I'm a completely different person than when I started the journey because of hearing these voices. Like I carry them with me, and I think there's something fabulous about thinking about I'm viewing the moon and the stars, and so is somebody else over on the opposite side of the earth who I think I'm so different from, and they're having a similar internal experience to me. Or when we first start, there's only a couple people on it, and then all of a sudden, somebody in Tehran picked the exact 3 emotions that I did, and I don't know who it is. We don't put faces on it. So because I think the global unknown of it actually makes you more empathetic, right? It's like just some random person. And that makes me, when I go out in the world here, on the peninsula, and I look across the table and I'm like, I wonder how she's feeling. That's huge for us to start wondering about how somebody else feels. It's just one of the biggest things that we need to do right now is actually consider. And there are voices, we talk about peace, and the thing that that really hit me is many times I ask them to reflect on a moment of peace in their life. And in many different, it wasn't just one culture, but many places people talked about a death of someone they loved, and that they were talking about it in the context of peace. It seems to be a universal thing, which always kind of gives me chills. That there's this sense of a passing of somebody and deep love and a hope for peace in a passing that seems to live in every culture.
I was thinking about that earlier, the relationship between peace and this kind of, it seems like human fear of death. The desire for that peaceful passing, which I think we all want.
People are also reflecting, it's like the first breath and the last breath. What an honor to be able to be somewhere for someone's first breath, but also such a huge honor to be with somebody on their last. There's something so real about that moment. Everything else gets washed away. I get why somebody would say that's peaceful, even though they're letting go and they're going to now have to go through their own grief. But in that moment, I've heard people say it over and over again, that witnessing has had a peace to it. Now that's different than, there was a gentleman from Pakistan who talked about, we asked what peace was to him, and he said, peace is the moment between 2 dead bodies falling.
Wow.
Right. Just stop in your tracks when you hear that, because you recognize this is a man who experiences a lot of loss often. And the conversation of dead bodies dropping, it's like, okay, these are not peaceful moments of passing on. And there's a whole different level. That takes away all the politics and all the arguments, and it brings you right back down to humanity about like what's happening on the planet and what we're doing to each other, and the results of the actions that we're taking against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Given this moment of when we're living, what is one question that you think is essential that we should be asking ourselves or the world in this time?
Well, I also want to answer that question in context of being at Accelerate Peace Conference, and the work that URI does in these cooperation circles. What's that about, right? And I think the actual act of being in those circles is answering that question.
Mm-hmm.
That there is an activity that's happening, that we are looking at each other and trying to find the strengths in our differences as well as the connective thread. And I think that's a key part to any success that we're going to have as a human race right now.
Right.
Just as humanity in general. There's also something else that I'm kind of grokking with lately, which is, what does it mean to be a successful person on the planet right now? And I think that needs to shift. Just what those bullet points are of like, this means I'm a success, you know, and given what's actually happening on the planet right now, success needs to be demonstrated differently. Like, wouldn't it be great if there was a cultural success to understanding that your legacy on the planet isn't just about your kids, I mean, I don't know how many greats we're going to get to at this point.
Right.
And if we can look at it from a perspective where it's not nihilistic to think that way, but more, no, I want to be super present in what's actually happening right now and the good that I can do on a daily, and recognize that that is equally important to the amount of money I have in the bank, if not more at this moment in time. And I also have been thinking a lot about how can we shift, I'm kind of calling it like the hierarchy of care, right? You're going to have the diasporas that are happening around the world. This is just going to get more and more and more and more. And there seems to be a hierarchy of care of what people put their attention to, because it gets overwhelming. But can we build systems where there's some neutrality to it? Meaning one disaster doesn't get more than the other because it hits some, cultural tick boxes.
Right.
But that actually, as a planet, we need to start putting some systems in place for when a disaster happens or when there is, shift in need. Who are we going to be in this moment in time in history? Even though there might not be history books in the future, I want to know, at least in my daily, I'm on the right side of history.
You've been listening to Religica. Visit us at www.religica.org.